Okay. Jax, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing fine. I'm interviewing different leaders that have been in the cannabis reform movement going back several sessions. And I'm trying to get their input basically on what was different about the 84th legislative session as compared to legislative sessions in the past.
I mean, the obvious and biggest difference was the volume of the bills that we had. You know, we're lucky we have maybe 2 good bills repeatedly was kind of how it was going, and we had 12 this session. And we went from the bills being, oh, well, it'll still be a criminal penalty, but a slightly less stringent criminal penalty, and something that, only provided a protection technically for the patients, to things that would fully repeal cannabis law in Texas, to a CBD bill actually even passing. There's a lot of people who feel strongly one way or the other about the CBD bill, but the fact of the matter is it's helping people where no one was being helped before. And so, I mean, that's a huge deal. That's a huge difference. And also there was a lot of coalition building for this last session, which made our voices really strong. And we know that cannabis law reform has been on the forefront at the last 2, maybe you could argue 3 legislative sessions. But this session, we know for a fact that over 15,000 emails were sent directly from constituents to their elected legislator in regards to some type of cannabis law reform. So, I mean, that's, for that many people to be engaged enough to write their legislators, that doesn't happen on many topics.
The number of people, were there more people involved this session than prior sessions?
We had a 25 organization coalition working at it this time, branching out into a lot of different areas. And, we had law enforcement and judges showing up. We've been able to coordinate testimony for about the last 3 sessions, but this last session was the most intensive, coordination of testimony, because you want the representatives and the senators to really feel, what the patients or, what the victims of the failed drug war are going through. But at the same time, they're humans and they don't want to sit for 12 hours at a hearing. So you have to make that balance of making sure that all of the topics are being touched on without being repetitive. And we were able to really do that well at both of the hearings for the medical, for the full medical bill and for 507. We had really cohesive arguments where we had a team of people who each had a topic, and then we also had additional people who came and showed up to lend their own, personal stories.
What do you think the successes in Alaska, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and Washington, D.C., and the 24 plus states for medical cannabis, what effect do you think that had on Texas politics and Texas politicians?
Well, I think it excited and scared them. It made it a really hot topic. I mean, once Colorado legalized in 2014, I think since then I've probably done easily over 200 different interviews. We weren't doing 200 interviews in like the whole time it'd been the millennium. You know what I mean? So it became a really hot topic, and I think that excited some people but scared others, because it is a wave of change that's coming, and we have to figure how ahead of the curve are we going to be, and how forward thinking are we going to be. And so some people were excited by that idea but maybe afraid they wouldn't be reelected, and others were like, oh no. So
is there something that the cannabis reform movement did or did not do in the 84th session that would have resulted in more successes of past cannabis bills, or was the political process locked before you even started?
That's a pretty loaded question. Are there things that you can look back 20/20 hindsight and say you could have done differently, should have done better, this, that, and the other? Of course, I'm sure there was. But we really did, for the bandwidth that we had, above and beyond what I personally expected. I was very thrilled with the legislative session. The fact that we got something passed, we thought that probably nothing would pass this session, and that 2017 would be like the really big where we got a lot of changes. And so for us to actually get something this session was a big win. So, you know, looking back, I think that it's not wins and losses, it's wins and lessons. But I do also think to a certain extent that the game was kind of set up before we got started playing. And I think that to a certain extent the way that the CBD bill played out kind of shows that. So we'll see how it unfolds over the next, you know, year and a half, 20 months as we approach the next session.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that, but I think that I think there's two illustrations that show that all of the groups that came together and lobbied and spoke to legislatures and the parents resulted in two people, Myra Crownover and Scott Turner, not running again for office. I believe that had some effect.
I think it did have a bearing, but I think, you know, with Crownover, there was definitely some other topics at play. You know, there was another bill that was named after her district that she also killed, and people were very upset about that. But I think that there was a poll in Myra Crownover's district that said if she kills, you know, a medical marijuana bill, would you vote for her again? And like 51% of the people, or 60%, I can't remember exactly right now, but it was over 50% of the people said that they would probably not vote for her again. Well, you killed the bill. Now those people probably aren't going to vote for you. And you might not get the funding that you would have gotten before. And so I think it's kind of showing politicians to a certain extent, you know, the entrenched way that things have been. There's new money, new business, you know, new ways to show compassion to people that the people of Texas want to see.
I agree 100%. Now that you're the new director of Texas NORML, what are your goals for between now and the 85th legislative session?
I have like a 3-page timeline of dates, key dates, and I'm going to touch on some of them tonight in the training. But I'll be going around with our coalition, doing regional trainings until the end of the year. And then we'll be working on getting a primary voter's guide, which we've never done before. You know, Texas NORML started the voter's guide back in 2012.
You had a hand in that, didn't you?
Oh no, that's my pet project.
That's your, okay, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. Yes.
I innovated that, and I'm very proud of it.
Very good.
But fortunately, you know, we have this great coalition that we can work with now to expand it even more. So we're going to be doing a primary voter guide. We're going to do a general election voters guide. Through that, we're also going to be doing voter registration drives. I'm becoming a voter registrar. We're going to talk about the importance of being a voter registrar. And of course, throughout that time, you know, there's going to be marches, there's going to be events to be doing. The first bill can be filed in the end of November of 2016. So ideally, we should have our sponsors and our authors already lined up to get ahead of that game. And then we're going to have another lobby day, another activist training day. We're going to have more patient lobby days. Do you remember the educational exhibit that we did? Mm-hmm. We're going to do 2 of those next session. So I mean, it's taking the foundation that we already have and expounding on it, and also networking with other organizations. You know, there's a lot of different organizations that focus on some of the conditions that cannabis helps that I really want to start networking with. So that's something else that I'm working on.
Building coalition. So from what you said right now, I can only assume that the 85th legislative session is going to be bigger and better and more people than the 84th.
It better be.
Well, I can't see how it won't be.
And with all of the stuff that's happening this, you know, election cycle and this ballot cycle across the nation, we're gonna, just like whenever Colorado went legal and we saw all that, you know, fervor kind of bubble up, we're gonna see it again as more stuff happens. And so it's just, you know, this is a marathon, and it's about, you know, knowing when to, you know, just truck right along and when it's time to sprint. And right now, it's time to stay on top of our timelines, stay on top of our goals, and it's going to be time to sprint in a little bit longer.
I was really excited. It was kind of a, I don't know how you feel, I'll get your thoughts on this in a second, but I was really excited to see the topic of medical and legalization come up in the debates on the Republican primary, because that's the first time in history that subject and topic has ever come up.
Oh, and you know, I mean, if you remember whenever Clinton came out about it in the 90s, You know, he had to be like, oh, I didn't inhale. Oh, it's this, you know, Jeb Bush, people laughed. They were like, oh, smoked marijuana. Silly kid, you know. But, you know, Rand Paul did have a good point that, you know, all of these people that are maybe not in the same socioeconomic realm as the Bush family are not having that same experience. People aren't just laughing it off. They're being criminalized for it.
Right.
And so
That's true.
through the election cycle, we want to, you know, not only be participating in the primaries, but in the convention level to make sure that, you know, the Democrats have a pretty decent plank right now on marijuana, so make sure that we keep that, if not strengthen it. There was almost a plank added to the Republican platform in the last session, so we'd love to see a plank added this time around, so that we can actually go and say, hey, this is part of your political party's platform. You know, you need to stick with this.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And right before the 85th legislative session starts, I'd like to interview you again, and then after the session ends.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're
Jax.
welcome. Of
Thank
course.
you.